Hello, everyone. This is Abbas from Biztechmasters. I'm going to talk about information security risk assessments today. Essentially, why an information security risk assessment is needed. Essentially, there is risk in everything we do. There are different types of risk assessments. There are strategic risk assessments that organizations do to essentially manage better what their strategic direction is. There's a business unit level risk assessment that a number of organizations do to understand what the risks are in a particular business unit. For example, one of our clients um, that was in the financial institution. They were having, after the banking crisis in U.S., they were concerned about um, their lending function. So we did a business unit level risk assessment at, for example, the lending side where lenders are working. That's considered as one business unit. Another business unit was the credit approvals department, which is a back office function. So a risk assessment covering all the key areas of uh, the credit approvals department, as well as the disbursement business unit, which is a separate business unit. So again, that is business unit level risk assessment. There are also process level risk assessments. Process level risk assessment is essentially more drill down, further drill down. So at the highest level, there's a strategic risk assessment. Below that is a departmental or business unit, business function level risk assessment. And further down, further detailed is the process level risk assessment, where you're looking at a particular process step by step. You chart it out, you look at the control points, and then you look at the risks. Whenever there's a criteria such as decision, for example, in a lending function, um, when there is a secondary review being performed, that it can be considered a control point, and essentially areas of higher risk can be managed by um, having controls in place to manage or mitigate the risks. So some basic concepts about risk management. There's risk in everything we do, as I mentioned earlier. Um, every effort within business has legal, IT, HR, all types of risks. And to manage the risks, you have to first of all do a risk assessment to see what the risks are, what is the severity, and then prioritize the risks accordingly. So this particular presentation, as I said earlier, is about an information security risk assessment. So um, what it is essentially in IT in general. There are IT risks, but overall the key area to be concerned about is information security, which covers confidentiality, integrity, and availability, which is considered this CIA information security triad. The three areas are confidentiality, integrity, and availability are the three areas that we consider when we're doing an information security risk assessment. So essentially, I'll just read out from our company brochures. It is a bit of a repeat of what I mentioned earlier. But why is an information security risk assessment and security management needed? So essentially, organizations need to protect and control access to their information assets. Um, Security breaches can happen at the weakest point. For example, lack of security awareness of employees can cause leakage of sensitive information. You can have the best network firewalls to protect your data, but uh, essentially lack of security awareness could cause social engineering, which can through which you can lose data to just employees' lack of awareness. So again, information security risk assessment helps manage and close those information security gaps. Organizations can manage risks better with improved security. So there are different approaches to doing information security risk assessments. There's the ISO recent standard ISO 31010, which is information technology risk assessments. So, the key areas to consider when doing a risk assessment are essentially you have to customize it for a particular organization. For example, let's say if an organization has an IT infrastructure business unit and an applications development business unit, help desk business unit. So you can categorize these different business units and the risks that these business units face at a higher level. So it would be a information security risk assessment at the business unit level and categorize the different risks that and list the risks that are that would be out there for particular organization's business unit. So um, once those risks are listed, you would list the likelihood of that risk materializing into um, an issue as well as the consequence or impact. So you have to develop a rating scale, list the likelihood and consequence, and based on a combination of likelihood and consequence, you have to have a rating scale for the overall severity of that risk. So how severe would be the problem if that risk materializes. So um, also to list would be for explanation and understanding purposes would be in a table format um, the vulnerabilities and the threats that would be causing the risks to have to actually happen. So um, for example, the risk of um, uh, you know, a breach, of the firewall would be, vulnerability maybe if an organization does not have, a good IPS intrusion prevention system or IDS intrusion detection system in place. Breaches could not be um, easily noticed. So essentially, that not having that would be considered a vulnerability. The threat would be an outside hacker. It could be an inside if someone comes in as a visitor. There are ports at the entrance, which which bypass the firewall. You're not segregated outside of the company's internal firewall. So just giving you some examples of what could be listed as threats and vulnerabilities, as well as the likelihood of that occurring would be based on you would the way you would do it is you would interview the key the department personnel and see whether it has happened in the past year or a few years. And if it has happened, what has been the impact? So it could be a high, medium, low, or 1 to 5 scale. We typically customize it for our clients, and essentially based on these interviews, reviews of past issues, incident reports, existing documentation at a client, you can at an organization, you can essentially develop the risk framework where you have the list of risks or the risk register, the likelihood of the risk occurring based on the vulnerabilities and threats that you listed, and the consequence of that. And then, the other thing you can list is before you could list the existing controls that you have now, as well as um, the additional controls that you can add to mitigate the risks. So those would tie in with essentially an action plan, so that you can add additional controls to manage or mitigate the risks. So for example, if the risk of of a hacker coming in to the system for security breach is high, you can add more, after doing the likelihood and impact weightings and coming up with a security level. If that is coming out high, you can have additional controls in place. So controls could be essentially adding more infrastructure controls, for example, adding additional detection, IPS, IDS, or other software, monitoring software or hardware, um, or it could be, like in some cases it's risk avoidance or acceptance, or risk transference. Risk transference is where you can, um, for example, my companies sometimes see a risk, like for example flooding. So you buy insurance to essentially manage the risk of flooding. Um, so insurance is another way to manage risks. Risk avoid acceptance is you see a risk, you see that can happen, but the maybe the controls that are available are cost more than the um, the perceived benefit that an organization would get. So the cost of the risk materializing is less than the cost of um, putting in a mitigating control. So, for example, if it's a network that doesn't have highly sensitive information and somebody breaches it, it and if somebody breaches the network, you you may lose some information, but the cost of putting the compensating controls, such as monitoring software, hardware, is way more than the cost of it would take if your data is lost. Then you would probably just not accept the risk. So that is a risk, but you accept it because the cost of putting the controls is too high. So essentially, once the risk assessment, you've done the risk assessment, then you create a roadmap of what needs to be done to stepwise controls that compensating controls, additional controls that you need to put in place to um, get the organization into a better security posture. Again, the ultimate goal is to have a better information security program at the organization, and risk assessment is a way, as a first step to understand what exactly needs to be done. So, understanding the current state and doing the risk assessment and creating a roadmap to the future state of the organization. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video presentation. This is Abbas from Biztechmasters. Thanks. Bye.